I will begin then with our first prophet and lawgiver Moses, first explaining the times in which he lived, on authorities which among you are worthy of all credit. For I do not propose to prove these things only from our own divine histories, which as yet you are unwilling to credit on account of the inveterate error of your forefathers, but also from your own histories and such too, as have no reference to our worship, that you may know that of all your teachers, whether sages, poets, historians, philosophers, or lawgivers, by far the oldest, as the Greek histories show us, was Moses, who was our first religious teacher. For in the times of Augages and Inachus, whom some of your poets suppose to have been earthborn, Moses is mentioned as the leader and ruler of the Jewish nation. For in this way he is mentioned both by Polemon in the first book of his Hellenics, and by Appian, son of Posidonius, in his book against the Jews, and in the fourth book of his history, where he says that during the reign of Inachus over Argos, the Jews revolted from Amasis, king of the Egyptians, and that Moses led them. And Ptolemaeus the Mendesian, in relating the history of Egypt, concurs in all this. And those who write the Athenian history, Hellanicus and Philochorus, the author of the Attic history, Castor and Thallus and Alexander Polyhistor, and also the very well-informed writers on Jewish affairs, Philo and Josephus, have mentioned Moses as a very ancient and time-honored prince of the Jews. Josephus, certainly, desiring to signify even by the title of his work the antiquity and age of the history, wrote thus at the commencement of the history, Ye Jewish Antiquities of Flavius Josephus, signifying the oldness of the history by the word antiquities, and your most renowned historian Diodorus, who employed 30 whole years in epitomizing the libraries, and who, as he himself wrote, traveled over both Asia and Europe for the sake of great accuracy, and thus became an eyewitness of very many things, wrote 40 entire books of his own history. And he in the first book, having said that he had learned from the Egyptian priests that Moses was an ancient lawgiver, and even the first wrote of him in these very words, For subsequent to the ancient manner of living in Egypt, which gods and heroes are fabled to have regulated, they say that Moses first persuaded the people to use written laws and to live by them, and he is recorded to have been a man both great of soul and of great faculty in social matters. Then, having proceeded a little further, and wishing to mention the ancient lawgivers, he mentions Moses first, for he spoke in these words, Among the Jews they say that Moses ascribed his laws to that God who is called Jehovah, whether because they judged it a marvelous and quite divine conception, which promised to benefit a multitude of men, or because they were of opinion that the people would be the more obedient when they contemplated the majesty and power of those who were said to have invented the laws. And they say that Sasunches was the second Egyptian legislator, a man of excellent understanding. And the third, they say, was Sesonkosis the king, who not only performed the most brilliant military exploits of any in Egypt, but also consolidated that warlike race by legislation. And the fourth lawgiver, they say, was Bocorus the king, a wise and surpassingly skillful man, and after him it is said that Amasis the king acceded to the government, whom they relate to have regulated all that pertains to the rulers of provinces, and to the general administration of the government of Egypt. And they say that Darius, the father of Xerxes, was the sixth who legislated for the Egyptians.